Today we are going to talk about in this session how to write quality code, or else how to write maintainable and readable code. So that's the main topic that we are going to talk today. When I got the invitation maybe last week to do the session, initially I thought of doing something related to a programming language or else some hot framework, maybe React or else Angular, something else or something. But then I was thinking maybe if I do something related to a introduction to a programming language or something like that, it will not be useful for everyone because maybe some of you are not familiar or else some of you don't want to know about that programming language or else you are not interested in that stack or something. So that's why I decided a topic which will be useful for everyone. So as a developer or else who will continue your career as a developer or else a career in QA engineer who are going to write test automations in the future as a QA engineer. So this will be useful. So that's why I decided, okay, let's talk something about quality code, how to write them and how to write maintainable code. Okay, so this is my introduction. I'm Dilum Navanjana and I prefer you find me on GitHub or as Twitter. These are my two profiles. And I'm from the fourth CIS batch of Department of Computing and Information System. And when I was in the university, Priyan sir was head of department and I graduated in 2016. After graduating, I did my internship in 99X Technologies and then I joined as a fresh graduate in 99X Technology. After that, I moved to Singapore. Okay, let's start. So the first slide, before dive deep into what is code quality, let's talk a little bit about code quality. So as a usual lecture session, actually, I will not try to give you some definitions about code quality because I was very bad at remembering definitions when I was in the university. So I don't want to put you in the same place. So code quality is subjective. It is subjective to person, or else it is subjective to programming language to language, and then it is subjective to a work company to company that you will be working in future. So because of that, because it is subjective, I will only go through some best practices or else I will go through some common code quality approaches which you can use for most of the programming language. I not say all programming language, but I would say like most of the programming languages. Because you will go through some common things, you will be able to use these code quality approaches in most of your projects. And also talking about code quality, please don't make this another theory that you learn and forget. It is better, it is useful, it will be useful for you if you use them in practice. So in your maybe in your next university project or else in your next open source project that you will be working, or else the next some application project that you do to earn some money when you are in the university, try to use some of these approaches and then try to learn, try to use them in practice. So you will understand them better and then you will remember them for your future as well, rather than remembering everything in your mind. Okay, so why code quality matters? There are a few reasons why code quality matters. First one, I would say, because why code quality matters, because you write code for future. So you write the code in the present, but you write the code for future. What I mentioned is future means we don't know whether this code, the implementation that you are doing here will be existed for the next 1 year, or else maybe it will be only existed for few months, or else it will be existed for 5 years to 10 years time. So that's why you should write your code for future. In the future, this code will be readable and maintainable for someone who will join your project later and then try to read this. So that's why you always try to consider your code to write for future. And the second reason I would say, because your code will be read by another human, not another computer. Everyone knows the code that you write compiled to a binary language, which we don't understand, but the computers understand. So if you write your code in a way that computers doesn't understand, there will be a compile error or else runtime error, which the computer or else the compiler will tell you this code is not readable to the computer. But if you write your code which computer can read but the human cannot read, there will be no compiling errors or else runtime errors. So this is the danger of writing bad code, writing unmaintainable code. So that's why you, as a practice, as a best practice, you should always write, at least you should always try to write maintainable and quality code, because it will be read in the future by a human, not a computer. It will be read by someone else, or else maybe you in the future, maybe in after a few months. One more reason is because your code grow bigger and bigger for when you write application. Software 99% of the time doesn't stay the same size. So that's why when you are writing your code, it should be flexible enough to grow bigger and bigger for the future. Maybe when you start a project, it will start with one class, but in the very near future, it will in couple of months it will reach 100 classes. From one line to it will reach millions of lines of code. You may have heard this term from the developers in the industry, where they said we have a project like this which is like 5 years old, but we decided to rewrite everything from beginning, from a new programming language or a new framework, which is cool, as they say. But this is totally a failure from their side. It is not something cool that they do. If they because they are rewriting everything from the beginning, means that they cannot maintain the project anymore. It is not maintainable because there are bad practices that they used when writing the code. So if you consider writing maintainable quality code from the first day of your project, in a couple of years, it will not be a failure or as unmaintainable project that you have to rewrite everything from the beginning and you have to spend months or years rewriting everything. So that's why when you grow bigger and bigger, if you write maintainable code, the code will survive. Otherwise, it will be a failure. One day you have to rewrite everything. The last reason why code quality matters, because everyone, as developers, everyone can write code, but only best can write quality code, maintainable code. So every developer can write code. Just Google and find the Stack Overflow answer and copy paste, and it works, right? But the best developers who write the code always consider the readability, or else and the maintainability, or else the quality of the code that they write. They don't write a new feature or else fixing a bug for the sake of finishing a feature on time or else fixing a bug quickly. So when you become, if you can write a maintainable quality code, you can be the best among others, which will be good for your internship. Or else as a fresh graduate, you can get highlighted very easily among your other developers, or else among your other senior developers, and you can be a very good developer. Okay, so let's talk about how to write quality code. This is the main topic that I am going to go with you few scenarios, few examples of how to write quality code. I will show you some bad practices, and then I will show you some best practices that you can use for those bad behaviors. So yeah, so I have around 9 steps, 9 examples and 9 behaviors, which I will go through in the upcoming few minutes. So these are not the all possible ways that you can write quality code. There are hundreds of ways. There are very specific programming language specific best approaches and maintainable approaches. But the ones that I show you here are very common possible ways. So I wanted to be as generic as possible, because we have like 50 or 60 participants here. I need to address every one of you, and I want you to get something from this session, not very specific, maybe front-end developers or else back-end developers, or else who want to be data engineers, something like that. So that's why I will go with you some very common approaches. Okay, let's start with the one that everyone knows. I hope that you also learned about this. Actually, we learned about this when we were in the university, maybe first year, second year, I don't remember. Variable names. It's very important. This is like the one of the basic things you need to consider if you are going to write quality or else maintainable code. So this is not a very hard thing to do, but you should always try to use very meaningful variable names for your variables. I would say it is not just the variable names. You should consider having meaningful variable names, method names, class names, and as well as file names. It is not just only variable names that you should consider having meaningful names, but method names, class names, file names, everything. As a developer, this is not the easiest thing that we do while we are programming. Actual programming is the easiest thing, but finding a better name for variable is sometimes it is the hardest thing. But I will quickly go with you how we can identify and how we can find a meaningful and better namings for your variables, names, and classes. So for example, this is just 3 lines of code. This is very first things we learn in the university, like for loops, right? So this is a for loop, and we have a variable called array, and we are iterating through this array, and we are assigning the elements to the text. Very basic, 3 lines, and everyone understand. I hope everyone understand. So here, by looking at this thing, what I understand is this is a for loop, and we are iterating through a variable called array, which I only know it is an array, but I don't know what's inside this array. So by looking at this, it is not very understandable for me what exactly what we are doing, because it is just the array that I can see here we are iterating, but I don't understand what's inside this array. Because of this very generic variable name that I am using here. So because of that, I can change this variable name into something something kind of descriptive, which is titles. Okay, so when I see titles, I can get some idea. Okay, this is the titles array which we have in this project. We are iterating through titles in this for loop. So by looking at this, by using this variable name titles, it makes me easier to understand what we are doing by this for loop. But still, I would say this naming title is too generic, because titles can be maybe like blog post titles or page titles, or else customer title or anything. So we can be even more specific about this titles array. So something like page titles. So when I see these page titles, I definitely know this is the list of page titles in our application that we are iterating through. This is not some user titles or some other maybe some other product titles or anything. This is the page titles that we are iterating. So by doing something like this, by using very meaningful variable names, it lets this 3 lines to explain itself what it does. So by looking at this, by few seconds, you will be able to understand what's the purpose of this for loop and what we are doing by this. How we can how we can come up with specific and very descriptive variable names or else method names and class names. So every project has its own unique set of names. So for example, I would like to take the very famous project. I think still CIS department do this in software engineering modules. We did the shopping cart. So in maybe second year or else third year, we had a project in software engineering, but in that we had to implement a shopping cart. So I would like to take this project as an example to introduce you how to have meaningful names, variable names, method names, class names. I have this way of identifying the shopping cart modules is called domain approach. So you each and every project has a set of domains that we are using. So in this shopping cart project, we have customers, products, customers are the ones log in and sign in, and we have products in the shopping cart, and then customers go through the products and put orders, and then while we are processing the order, we process the payment using a payment gateway or something. So these are the 4 main components of this project. So by doing this, I can understand. So these are the main 4 components of this project. So so in this customer, you have like name, email, birthday, password, or products have name, category, like something like this, some these kind of attributes. So when I am choosing a variable name for a customer, what I can do is, if the customer is a logged in customer, so the variable name can be logged in customer. So it is not just the customer, it's a logged in customer, the variable name. So when I see anywhere in my application a variable name called logged in customer, I definitely know this is the customer that currently logged in our system. Or else we can have variables like customer data, which is directly referencing customers data inside your customer. Or else we can have arrays like customers. So when I see an array called customers, I definitely know this is a list of customer objects. This cannot be a list of product objects. This should be, if you have a variable name called customers and the array has a product array, then definitely it's something wrong with your application. But if you have a list of customers as an array, then you should definitely name them as customers. So by looking at that variable name, you know this is the customer array. Or else you can do the same thing with products as well. I put some examples here for you. And for method names, it's almost the same. So because you already have the domain and the components you already know for this project, for anything customer related, you can you can have a method called update password, which take the argument customer, and then by looking at this method, you can see this is definitely something we update the customer password. So you don't need to even look at the look inside the implementation. By looking at the method name and the argument, you can understand what's happening inside the method. So it's the same for, I have given some few more examples as well for you. And then the last one is class names. So class names as well, it is the same approach. So for products, we can have service classes, some things like manage products, which do some managing products. So, and then validate products, which is validating products, and configure or as product calculator, which calculates some maybe amount or something related to the product. So it's same for payments. Payments can have process payments, payment authorize, or else cancel payments. By looking at these classes, you know this is something which we do, and you can get some idea what we do inside this class. So that's what important of having self-explanatory variable names and method names and class names. And it's the same for file names as well. So the second one is file size. I mean, file size is not the storage size, or as like kilobytes or as megabytes of the file size, but I mentioned file size here, how many lines of code in one file. So how many lines of code in one file matters, because I have seen in Sri Lanka in actual workplaces where they use one file with like 1,000 lines of code in one file, which is like a nightmare if you start to read the code, read the implementation, because you cannot find anything very easily. You always need to search and find everything. If you want to search a method name, you need to search and then find what's inside it. It's very easy to go through the class because it has 1,000 lines of code. So how we become a small class to the 1,000 lines of class is, so for example, we have a class called payment processor. So here you don't need to worry about the syntax here. This is not a specific programming language. I don't even know whether this is a programming language or not. I just use some class called payment processor, and then for the sake of having a method, I call this as a function, and then the function name is process, and then I have two arguments, which is amount and the order, right? So so this is for the sake of easily understanding you. We have payment processor class, and then we have process payment. Everything works fine. It is just few lines of code, right? Everyone happy. But then I initially I said your software, your project grows bigger and bigger, right? So in upcoming months, you will add more features to this payment processor class, and then it is getting bigger and bigger day by day. So then that's how you start with a very simple class, but then moving forward, it is possible one day you will end up with this payment processor with maybe 1,000 lines of code. So which is not the best thing that you can do for your project, because it will not be maintainable or as readable, and it is not a good developer practice. So so talking about this payment processor, so that's why we should always consider having a limit for yourself, for your project, or else within your team of developers. You should have a rule which can be different from each programming language to each programming language, because some programming language prefer to have more lines in one file, or else some prefer to have very few lines of code in one class. So I would say my number of lines, my number for this file number, lines of code. So I will start worrying when I have 100 lines of code in one class. So I do not start refactoring if I have 100 lines in one class, but I will start getting noticed there's something is going on with this class, which I should not do inside this class. That's why this is growing more than 100 lines of code. But I will still consider keeping that with me without doing any refactoring or else moving some methods from this class to some other class. But I noticed this and I start getting worried. But then you are doing something wrong. Definitely, if you pass 150 lines of code, this is my number, so definitely need to refactor. So if you pass 150 lines of code in one of your classes, then definitely you need to consider refactor your code, because it is getting bigger and bigger, and 150 and you are passing that line means it is getting unreadable already. So you are passing 150 means you will have at least already like 5 to 6 or else more than that methods inside. And then it is doing too much. This class is doing too much for you. So that's why you should definitely start refactoring if you are passing 150. So this is my number of lines. But for each and every one of you, each and everyone in your own projects, as a team, you can decide, okay, we will have 50 lines as the limit, or as 100 lines as the limit, or as 150 lines as the limit. So it's up to you. But as a good developer practice inside your team of your project, you should have this number. So it should not be something like 1,000 lines. It should be definitely around 100 and 150, or else maximum I would say 200, but I don't recommend going to 200 lines of code, because 200 lines means already it is not readable and it is not good quality code. Okay, the third one, single responsibility. I think this one also you learn from while you are in the university. So classes and methods should have only one responsibility. Why I would say that? Because classes and methods are meant to be only one responsibility for each and everyone. For example, we have something like Bank API class, which only do connecting with the bank and charge the customer. So this is very simple. We have the bank object, we have a bank API class, which has a method called charge payment, which takes the argument order, and then we call Bank.charge, and then we tell the charge method the amount that we need to charge, and then we return the charge amount, which is perfectly fine. So this class has only one responsibility, which is connecting with the bank and charge, because this is an API class. And this charge payment only has one thing to do, which is charging the order amount from the bank. So, so this is a single responsibility. But then one of your project managers, or else new requirements come in and say, we are charging the customer, but we don't send the customer a successful payment email. So this is the scenario. So some customers get confused because they didn't get a successful success payment email, because even though we charge the customer. So this is a requirement come to you, and you go through the implementation, and then you end up here. This is the place that you charge the customer from the bank. And then what you do is you create an email implementation, a nice email implementation, and then you call that implementation from this class, which is totally wrong. You should not do these kind of things, because this is a bank API class, and this method is charge payment, and you should not send successful payment emails from this class. This class is supposed to do only charge customers. So in this code's example, we are violating the single responsibility, which is not the best developer behavior, best developer approach that you can do. This is a bad developer approach. So, for example, one more thing. In the future, you need to have a requirement. You got a requirement to validate the payment before charging the customer. So what you do is, okay, the easiest place to validate the payment is implementing it before charging the customer from the bank. So easiest thing, you add a new method called validate payment, and you do whatever the logic inside this method which validate the payment, which is wrong, because this is the class for bank API and charging the customer. It should not do any validation related to the payment inside this class, because this is the bank API class. So in this kind of scenarios, what you should do is you can have some other a class on top of bank API, something like order processor class, which process the order. When you process the order, what you can do, you validate the payment first, and then you call the bank API.charge charge payment method from there. So your bank API class will not do anything related to the validation, but your order processing class is the one doing the validation for you. So your bank API class will follow the single responsibility, so you will not violate in that scenario. So which is a good approach. And the fourth one is the comments. So this is something controversial. Someone can say comments are good. I would say comments are bad. I have few reasons because I am saying because comments are bad. I would explain in a few minutes. So I recommend as developers to let your code describe itself. Don't try to describe your code by commenting what you are doing there, but try let your code describe itself what it is doing. I have few reasons why we should let your code to describe itself instead of writing comments. For example, let's say we have a method called execute, and then it gets an object called obj. I don't understand what's inside this obj, because until I run this application, or else just check what kind of class is this object. So I don't understand this. And then we do call Bank.process. I don't know what is this, what kind of process is this? Is this like a refund, or else deleting payment, or else charging payment? And I can see here this object, obj object has something called amount, and we are passing that amount. And then finally we have a response that we return. And finally, after writing this, we write the description, we write the explanation saying charge order amount from the bank as a comment. Okay, so by writing this, we think, okay, everything is fine now. We don't need to write any better codes or any good variable names, because I write a comment here explaining everything that we do here. So this is what we do normally if we write comments. So we try to avoid writing maintainable good code, because for the sake of writing comments, because we have already write comments to understand everything. So instead of this kind of approach, what we can do here is we can have a very descriptive method name and argument names, and then we can explain, we can let the code explain itself instead of writing that ugly comment as the first thing that we do. So why we should do this approach instead of comments? Because I told you this is controversial. So someone can say, no, we should write comments. I would say no. I would like to say no. We should consider writing better describable code itself instead of writing comments. So why we should consider this approach instead of writing comments and writing bad code? We maintain code, we fixing bugs in the code, but 99% of the time as developers, we don't maintain comments. Believe me or not, in the future, you will see some comments you didn't maintain at all in your code base, but you continue maintaining your code base. For example, I will take this example. We had this execute method, which earlier only took one argument called obj, but then we had a new feature came in where we implemented the discount. So when we have the discount implementation, we only charge the customer object.amount minus discount. So we minus the discount, subtract the discount from the amount, and then only charge the customer. So this is a new feature that we implemented. Everything works fine. But if you check your code, comment that you wrote earlier is not valid anymore. So it still says charge order amount from the bank, which is wrong. Yeah, now you don't charge the order amount from the bank, you charge the order amount minus discount from the bank. So 99% of the time, believe me, you implement this feature with the discount, but you don't change your comment to explain the change that you did here. So that's why I would say you try to let your code describe itself instead of try to comment out what's you are doing inside this method, or else whatever the class. So still there are places you should comment. There are still places you should consider writing comments. The places are when there are weird business logics in your application, or else the places where you have you want to warn you want to write some warnings for the developers who will do some modifications in the future for a method or else a class. You should warn them like there's some weird behavior like this, and please consider that while if you are going to do any changes for this method. So you can write comments for those warnings or else to do comments. You don't have you don't have time to do something, but you need to do some changes in the future you would like to do. So you write a to do comment here, saying I would like I want to do some changes here. So these kind of comments. And also as a good developer, you should not commit, or else you should not have production ready code with commented out codes. So as developers, we always like commented out implementations, and then like try some things, and finally when it finishes and when everything works, please try to remove your commented out codes, delete your commented out codes, because you should not keep them in your code base. It is a bad behavior. It is a bad developer approach. Uh, so the fifth one is code formatting. So this is a very simple one. There are linters which you can use for each and every programming language has different linters. So you can use linters for code formatting, which will automatically warn you when you are doing a code formatting error. So which is easy for you. Your linter tool will help you to go through examine the code that you wrote, and then if any code formatting errors that you do, it will warn you so you can fix it. So when you start, try to start your new project with a linter configured first, rather than configuring a linter in the middle of the project, because once you have like few months of code with you, and configuring a linter may be kind of hard, because you need to consider fixing all the formatting errors you did previously in previous few months. So it is better to start your new project with linters configured first. So if you want to have a list of linters, you can go to some websites. This is one example that you can go and check what are the your programming language related linters, or HTML, CSS related linters that you can use. The sixth one is code review. I will not talk more deep about code review, because code review is a separate topic that we can take a full session and talk about that. Code review is good. By code reviewing, you can identify bad code, bad implementation, unmaintainable implementations, and unreadable implementations. So please try to do code reviews. I'm not sure how many Sri Lankan IT companies do code reviews, but if you join Ascenda here, it is the first thing that we consider as the very seriously before committing any things. So each and everyone should do code reviews. By code reviewing, you can do code review of your own, or else you can review codes of other developers. There are many benefits that you can benefit from doing code reviews. One thing is, you can see if there are any mistakes done by you or else some other another colleague of you while doing the feature. So you can identify them, or else you can learn new things from code reviews. Like you have in your team, you have this awesome developer who writes awesome code. So by reviewing his code, then you can learn new things, like how he approach a new feature, or else how he fix a new bug, what kind of new approaches he did, and how well he write the maintainable code, and you can learn from him and use those experience in the future. The seventh one is if conditions. If conditions are good, not very good, but we use everywhere if conditions. We as developers, first few things we learned is if conditions when we learn how to program. But if conditions can lead you to unmaintainable and bad quality codes for you in your project. I will explain why. This is a one method, process payment, and which takes the argument order, and we have if condition which has two conditions here. By looking at this, this is still kind of okay. It might take some time for you to read this and understand what's exactly I am doing inside this if condition. But because we have two if conditions here, two conditions inside this if condition, it is kind of hard, but it is not the worst thing. But then in the future, you will have one more condition that you need to check before before doing this, calling this pay by cash method inside this if condition. So you added a new condition, and now we have three conditions here. It might be possible for you to understand it now, but definitely it will not be readable for even for you in next few months. You will see you will come here and you will try to understand here, but you will not be able to understand why I do something like this in maybe like 1 month ago, 2 months ago. So in this kind of approach, so this is why if conditions are not the best approach. If condition because if conditions lead you to some bad unreadable codes. So in this kind of scenario, what you can do is you can separate this if condition to a total new, maybe a private method. I didn't mention a private here because I want to make it simple. But now I moved the full if condition to a separate method called is cash payment order. Okay, now if I check the process payment method, I can see I check whether this order is cash payment order. If it is a cash payment order, then only I call pay by cash. So now it is easier for me to read this rather than having three if conditions inside the process payment, because the method name is cash payment order explains what I do inside this if condition, what I do inside this method. So that's why we should consider something like this when if we come up with we face some this kind of difficulty in our code. So we can get rid of this kind of bad unreadable code and then make it more readable for the future. And then one more example. So this is one more reason why if conditions will lead you to bad code, because initially you implemented this feature with only one if condition, but the new features and new implementations come in, and then the developers, believe me, the easiest thing developers do is they put else if there. So that's the easiest thing that a developer can do. But by doing this kind of else if, two else if, and then inside the one else if there's one more if else condition, this is becoming a nightmare to read and maintain, because there are so many if else if conditions, and process payment is doing so much things inside this, and it is hard to explain, hard to read and understand. So that's why if conditions can lead you to bad implementation. So you should consider, you should always be very careful. It is not possible to not use if conditions at all, because you have to use them, but you should be very careful when you are using if conditions. So think twice before adding an if condition. And the eighth one is unit testing. I will not talk about unit testing in deep, but unit testing is good. This is a separate topic that we can have a separate session. So learn to write unit test. As a good developer, you always should write unit test for a feature or else for implementation you do. That's a good developer behavior. So that's why you should learn how to write unit tests. It might take some time initially for you to write tests, but believe me, it will be helpful for you one day. Maybe not in 1 month or 2 months, but maybe 1 year or 2 years when you start refactoring a class. These unit tests are the only survivor for you when you do a refactoring. So the last one is too much inheritance. Inheritance, very familiar topic, name that we learned here in object-oriented programming, year 1, semester 2, one of the very lovable module that we had when we were in the university as well. So I hope it will be, it was a very interesting module for you as well, object-oriented programming. We learned a lot. And object-oriented programming, we learned about inheritance. Inheritance is this, so we have parent modules and child modules, and even child modules can have even more child modules. So we have products, and we have food as a child class, and then food is parent class for fruits, vegetables, and meat child classes. So this is again a controversial topic. Someone can say inheritance is good as a Java developer, or else I would like to say inheritance is bad in some scenarios using them. So inheritance should be used in model classes that share behaviors, something like this. So these are model classes. So this product, food, and everything is models inside our in our project. So using inheritance for model classes is something good, but this kind of in-deep inheritance will lead you to some bad complexity in your project, because one change in your base class could affect the behavior of your child. So for example, let's say you change one behavior of your product, of the product parent class, but you didn't expect, or else you didn't take it to a consideration, but all 6 child classes will affect by this one change that you did in product class. So because of that, inheritance will lead you to hiding complexity in your application. So that's why you should not have too deep inheritance in your classes. You can have one parent and one or two child classes, which is okay. But if you go too deep into the inheritance level, it will lead you to, it will hide complexity in you from your application, and then it will lead you to unreadable and unmaintainable and bad code. Yeah, that's it. And then the another one is inheritance is not to share common code. So inheritance is for sharing common behaviors in model classes, but inheritance is not to share common code. I will give you example. So we have credit card handler. We have two classes called credit card handler and bank deposit handler, which are service classes which handle some credit card related and bank deposit related payments. So while I'm developing this, I noticed both of these classes has a method called validate payment, which is a similar thing that we do. So what I do is I am going to, because this is common, what I can do, I can use, I learned object-oriented programming in first year, second semester. So I use inheritance. So I created the parent class called payment handler, and then moved that validate payment method, and then extend payment handler class from child classes of credit card handler and bank deposit handler. So everything works fine, but you should not do this, because you should not have share inheritance for sharing common codes in service classes. Instead, you only should have inheritance for model classes, model classes to share behaviors. So why I say that, and what's the approach for this kind of scenario is composition. So in this same thing, when we had this common validate behavior, what we can do is we can create a new class called service class called payment validator. Inside that, we can have the validate method, and then we are from credit card handler and bank deposit handler, I can call payment validator.validate method. So which explain, by looking at the credit card handler, I don't hide any of the complexity, and I don't hide anything that I do related to the validate, but I explicitly say payment validator.validator is the one that I use to validate my payment. So that's why we should use composition to share common codes instead of using inheritance. And yes, we learned about composition in OOP subject, but we were busy cramming 4 OOP principles for the exam, so we didn't give much attention to the composition. So so that's why please try to learn composition over inheritance and try to use them. It will help you, it will make your code better, readable, and better maintainable, and it will be a good quality code for you. I know everyone, so now everyone's brain is like overloaded now, so I don't show you any other code examples, or else I will not show you any other approaches for that you can do. So instead of that, if you're stuck in a bad code, couldn't think of any other better way to implement this bad code, implement this more readable, take a break and try different approach. Take a break means maybe a tea break, or else 10 to 15 minutes break, or a simple walk around your house or somewhere, or else a full day of break. Like you can start tomorrow fresh and try different approach. Believe me, it will help you to write your implementation with different approach, but with more readability and as a good quality code. After writing your code, try your best to make it more readable for others, because if you become a developer not to for the sake of finishing features on time, or else fixing bugs on time. You should be a good developer, and as a good developer you should always write your code which is readable and maintainable for others easily and for the future. So try to write code as best as you can. So so writing code is like a art. It's not art, but anyway, it's like art. So you should consider writing your code more readable. It is not just for the sake of fixing something on time. And then finally, let's go through everything very quickly. I will take only 2 minutes for this. So what code quality, so we initially talked about what code quality is. We said it is subjective to person, programming language to language, and company to company. It is subjective. So why code quality matters? We went through few reasons. The main reason, there are a few main reasons, because we write code for future, and the code that you wrote will be read by a human, not a computer, and then you can be a best developer and get highlighted easily among others if you write quality code. And how to write quality code, we went through 9 steps. Variable names, method names, class names should be very descriptive. And then file size. So 100 is the line limit that I am start getting worried. 150 is the line that I know I am definitely doing something wrong. Single responsibility, one method or else class should have only one responsibility. Your API class should not send any booking success emails. Or else comments, you should let your code to describe itself rather than commenting out what you are doing inside the method. But there are some special scenarios you should comment out, some things like weird business logics, or else warnings, or else to do comments. Code formatting, use lints. Code reviews is good. And try to review your code or else your colleagues code, so you can identify any issues, or else you can learn new things. If conditions, be careful when you are using if conditions can lead you to bad and unmaintainable codes in the future. Unit test is good. As a developer, you should learn how to write unit tests, so try to learn things. Unit tests. Too much inheritance is bad. Try to do composition over inheritance if it is a common shared implementation, shared common code in the service classes. That's it. And then last 2 slides. Try to be a best developer, not just another developer. So I would like all CIS graduates who are graduating from CIS to be best developers in Sri Lanka, not just another developer as any other 1,000 developers who are graduating every year from Sri Lanka. So try to be the best developer, so you can be highlighted among others, and it will be very good for CIS in the future as well. And last thing, why you should be a developer? Why you should be a developer? Because you will earn more money than any other in the IT industry. So you should consider be a developer. Believe me, that's true. That's it. And then question time. So if you have any questions, just contact me, maybe Twitter or GitHub or somewhere. I will try to help you if you have any questions related to this presentation. I hope you at least get some idea about how to write quality code instead of for the sake of writing code. And yeah, hope you have a very good career in IT sector and be very good developers in Sri Lanka or else anywhere in the world. Yeah, thanks.